Okay, so I was going to do a build your own software on this, but I decided to do just a devlog instead. I've done a bunch of build your own softwares already for software that's got much wider appeal than this software might have, and there's been virtually nobody wanting to watch it, no interest at all virtually, so no point doing any more of those for now until someone decides they actually want to watch them. But anyway, on to what I was talking about. So a YouTube channel, link in the description, for Paul Andrews. He's done some great videos on various Nixie clocks and Nixie tubes and things he's got, and some beautiful stuff. And one I watched this morning was for a Dekatron, and he's made a clock out of it. And so as you can see, it's running now. And so there's the hours, there's the seconds ticking around, and there's the minutes. So how many dots around the edge? Well, I had to pause it and count, didn't I? Because my brain works that way. So there's 30 dots around the edge. And he sped it up now so you can see, you can just see things moving. And so it's just animating now with with sped up. Okay, but so the big dots, the hours, the bright dots, the next brightest dots, the minutes, and the light dots, the seconds. There's multiple of them because it's in time lapse. So I just thought it was really nice. So what a nice way to tell the time. So the time now would be, so that's hours, so it's around about 5 o'clock-ish. So maybe 4:30, 5:30, if that's the minutes there. So I'd say 10 to 5 at the moment, and the seconds is just after half a minute. So quite a nice thing, really. And it's run by an Arduino, so it'd be a lovely little project for someone to do. But I'm a Java guy, or programmer, so I decided to poke around and build one in Java. So that's what this devlog's about, is my little attempt at building one of these in Java to do a clock like this. And this is sped up. I'll go back to the start. So this is what you normally see. Okay, so just the seconds counting round, and so that's what I'm aiming for anyway. So just my version of a Dekatron clock. So let's look at my code, and we'll talk through what I've done. Okay, so here's my Java code. I'll probably put it in my GitHub just in case it's useful to other people. If I forget and someone wants it, just leave a comment and I'll do it. And of course, a like, hey? Nobody clicks like these days. What's going on? Anyway, so I've got a class called Dekatron Clock, which handles all the data. So it's got the number of positions I want to store. And originally I started off with 30, then I play around with other ones, to make sure it worked for all positions, 60, 200, 30, 12, 11, all that sort of stuff. And so I've got to say, you can set the time and it works out the positions. So if you've got 60 positions around the clock and it's 30 seconds, it would be halfway round. If it's 45 seconds, it would be 3/4. If you've got a clock with 30 positions and you're 15 seconds in, then you're quarter way around the clock. So you're only 15 positions in. So that's what these are doing here. They're calculating how far around the circle or how far around the clock you are from the starting point. And I've got different values there, and that allocates colours back in the main GUI program. And I've got to say you can set the time to the current time, and it calls set time, which is the method we look up here to calculate the position around the clock for the hours, minutes, and seconds hands or colours or whatever you're moving, or the brightest dots. And that just returns the array, so I can do stuff with it, allocate buttons and colours and things. And I've got a class here which creates the J-frame. They're the colours, my buttons, so they're all grey, and then the seconds are green, the minutes are blue, or the minute hand's blue, and the hours is red. So we'll see that in a second. And so I've got some timers being kicked off to do various stuff. I was playing around with all sorts of things, and so I end up. So I've done it a few ways. So I'll just go through and take you through to one of the ways. So this is the simplest one. So create a clock panel with a 0 at the top left. So something like this. You're talking about a clock with 30 positions. So they go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 across, and then down here they count up, and then across here they count back, and up here they count up again until they get back to the start. Okay, nice and easy to code normally. Now Java, if you're dealing with like a grid layout, then you've got a grid of like 10 columns by 7 rows or whatever. Okay, And you can't just say, I want this button in this location or this label in this location. You've got to start here and work your way across, and then start on the next row and work your way across, and then start on the next row and work your way across. So as soon as you start dealing with a grid layout in Java, what should be simple code, just allocating the buttons in that order, going around a square or a triangle or whatever, it becomes quite a lot harder in Java. And when you take into account that you want this 0 to be able to move, so you want the 0 to maybe be here or here or here, if you want some strange clocks, or in the corners or anywhere you like, then the code becomes a lot more complicated. But this is the most simple case here, so with 0 on the top left. Okay, and I've got a lot of tried a lot of ways to do things. So I've got panels for the top, left, right, and bottom, and a certain number of cells on each one. And I'm just adding buttons to the panels in the order I need them. Okay, so sometimes I'm going from 0 to cols and adding that button index ++, and in other places I'm starting at the end of the array and working backwards. Okay, so index is pointing at the end of the array and working backwards. So that's adding these buttons here, 29, 28, 27, and so on. So I've got to add them in reverse order, because you can only add them in the order you want them in Java. Unless you're using something like GridLayout, then it all changes. And I did explore GridLayout, but it was like cracking a walnut with a sledgehammer. Much more complex than I needed to go. So I want to try and keep my code simple. Okay, so that was the first one I did. Created 4 panels and had the buttons on each, and then just add the panels to the user interface. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Just make sure that's the one in place. Yep, that's the one I'm going to see. So, okay, so there it is running. So it's currently, there's the seconds counting around. Okay, there's the hour hand, and there's the minutes, and 0's in the top left. Okay, so we're not used to telling the time that way. We're used to 0 or 12 being in the top center. Okay, so this is a strange clock to read. Okay, so the time now with that over there, you've got to sort of rotate the clock into this position to be able to read it properly. Okay, so it's round about, without looking at my clock, it looks like it's around about 10 o'clock if I rotated about 15 degrees or so, 20 degrees. And that's what it is. It's now 10:15. So that was the first one I did. Okay. Okay, and it's sort of okay. The thing I didn't like about it is you've got big buttons, big tall buttons on the sides. Oh, you can always shrink it up, of course. Okay, so now they're more like the same height as the bottom ones, but now you've got wide buttons along the bottom. Okay, so if you drag it into that sort of area there, you get something that's pretty close, but then the labels start cutting out here. Okay, and you got the gap, because I've got different panels. You've got a gap at the bottom. Again, I could write code to change all this and set preferred sizes and set minimum sizes, but I kept going away from that 4-panel solution. I kept saying, no, a grid layout should be the one I'm using. So I go back and try grid again, and the code's quite complex when you can move this 0 to anywhere you like around a circle or around a square. Okay, so okay, let's have a look at the next one I did. That was the first one, and then the second one's much more readable. It's got the clock it's got the 12 or the 0 in the center, or just to the right of the center. So this is much more readable now. You can see, if that's 12, that's probably 11-ish, and that's sort of 10-ish there in that region. And that's just after quarter past. So quarter past will be there. So it's, say, 20 past 10, something like that at night, which is pretty close to what it is. Okay. So much more easy to read, and you can see the seconds ticking around. It's not going, there's only 30 positions, so each one of those cells is occupied for 2 seconds, and then it moves on. Okay. So this is all fine. It's still using the multiple panels, but we got 0 in the middle there. But it did take quite a lot of code change to do that. I've had to, if we have a look at the code for that, so that was the first one with the 0 on the top left, and then we've now got the one with the 0 in the middle top, and there's the diagram of it there. So then you've got to worry about the offsets. How far am I offset in? So I fill in these buttons here, because you can only do them in the order they appear on the user interface. Okay, so I've got to fill in those last buttons from the end of the array here. So I've got to come back 5 into the array and fill in those last 5 buttons, and then start at the first button and move along. And then I'm going to start with the next button after that and move down, and then start with the next buttons available and move to the left, which means you can only fill the panels left to right. So that means I have to start with 19 and go across this way. Okay, you can only add data in the order they appear. Okay, so you can only go left to right in Java. You can't say I want to add this button to this cell unless you use GridLayout or something like that, which again, like I said, I didn't want to crack a walnut with a sledgehammer. Although I was heading that way because my next project was to make it so I could move the origin, or the 12. I could move it to here or anywhere I like around the square. Okay, and also change the number of clock positions, so I could have 60 or 10 or 200 or whatever I like. Of course, I've got to be able to take into account all possibilities when you write this sort of code. Okay, so again, this code became quite complicated with the 4 panels because I had to think about offsets, and then I was filling some buttons in here and filling the rest of the buttons in here for the top row, and then index, and there was all special cases of whether the 0 was on this part of the clock, or this part of the clock, or this part of the clock. I had all these special cases, and the code was becoming quite complex. So what I did, of course, is I got into Excel, and I mapped it out into Excel there, and then I worked out. Then I noticed a pattern. So if I got 0 in the top corner there, or if I got an offset of 5, whoops, go -5. So 0 is now here. Okay, so everything's stepped across, and this is all using cells that refer to the previous cell, which I didn't want. I wanted to be able to work out what the top left corner was, what index that was in the buttons array, if there's 30 buttons or 60 buttons or whatever around the whole thing. If there's here there's 30 positions, so I wanted to be able to work out what the index of the buttons was for that first index, 25, and then work out all the others from that. And once I'd worked it out, it was just so much simpler. I wish I'd done Excel earlier. It would have saved me a few hours of farting around. So that's always the way, isn't it? So if you're trying to work out algorithms and you're trying to write lots of code, even me with 4 decades of experience, come into Excel and map it out in Excel, and you can do things in much shorter time. So that's what I end up doing. So if I have -11, okay. So here now the 0's here, the top of the clock. So you now turn it nearly 90 degrees on its side, or you can have -16. So now the 0's down here, just after that row. So you can have it anywhere on the clock, and these formulas now help me work out what the values are based on the top left. So I just work out the top left, and then work out all these other positions relative to that. It made my code so much easier. Okay, so since I worked that out with Excel, I thought, that's it, I'm going back to a grid layout, and then I can have the top cells across the top the same size as the cells down the sides, and across the bottom they're all the same size cells, but it means I've got to fill in all this center area with lots of blank labels, okay? Because you can only fill things in Java unless you're using GridBag, like I said. You can only put a button here and then space the buttons across as many as you want, and then come down to the next row and keep adding buttons. Okay, so you can't say you want to add this button here and this button here. You've got to add all the other ones on the row first before you can add that button. Okay, so that's why it became a much more complicated program solution than it needed to be. But once I had these formulas worked out here, where they're all referring to that one cell, and the columns and rows and things up here, then I cracked it. Code became really easy after that. Okay, so let's turn that one on. We can have a look at that one in action. So I'll turn the third one on, which is the best solution by far. And I'll also add some controls on the bottom, and I'll turn off these now. I'm now calculating these some spinners on the screen on the user interface. We'll see it in a second. Okay, so there's my code running, and you'll see I've currently got 12 positions in the clock, starting at 0. So 0 to 11 are my positions in the clock. So that's like the 12. So the clock's turned almost 90 degrees to the left. If I want to bring that round so the 12 or the 0's here, I can just go. Okay, so now the 0's in the middle there. Okay, so I've rotated everything round. And if I want more resolution in the clock, so that I've got more places where the hands can point, I can just increase that like that. Okay, so I can just keep going up, and now we've got 30. So now we're pretty similar to what the Dekatron. Now we've got 30. Yep, so 0 to 29, and now we're pretty similar to what the Dekatron had. And I'll just move that 0 across the center. There we go. So that's pretty similar now to what the Dekatron over here had, what Paul's Dekatron had. So the 0's there on the top, just on the side of the top right there. Okay, and that's where it is here, and just on the side of the top right. And the seconds are ticking around the minutes and the hours. So we could tell the time now would be, it's almost half past. you know, if it's half past, the blue square would be here, so it's maybe 20 past, and it looks like it's about, so it's not 11, and it's certainly not 12, so it's about 20 past 10, I would say, and I'm looking at the clock now, and it's 23 past. So you can tell the clock even with just 30 spaces, and if you want to get more accurate, you can we'll go up to 60. Okay, and so now we've got 60, and we'll just move the offset across the center. There we go, that's in the center now. So now you can see we've got much more of a normal clock, but it's with colors instead of hands. So that's the hours, the red, the minutes is the blue, and the seconds is the green. Okay, so you can see those counting around. And when the seconds goes into the minutes hand, and when they're both in the same area, you can only see the minutes, because the minutes is most important. Okay, and same when they're both around on the hour, with the hour, you can only see the hour color, because the hour is most important. Okay, so that's pretty easy to tell now that it's well, it's 24 minutes past 10. And that's what the time is, because it's on the 24. I can easily tell what it is. Okay, so and the code for that was much simpler, so I'll just show you that code quickly. I don't expect people to understand it, it's just a quick walkthrough, really. Just middle top, that's the middle top one. So here's where here's the one the final one I set it on. But I was trying to work out the formulas here in my code with comments, and I've got trickier offsets when you've got the offset 5 into the middle, and then it's even more of a nightmare when you've got it can appear anywhere. And I even said in my code here, this is a nightmare. It depends on where the array ends and where this array starts and stuff. So, but in the end, once I worked it out in Excel, I just transcribed the formulas straight into here, and it's exactly the same. Okay, for example, here we're working across the top row, and the formula for the top row is the top left corner index plus the row number plus the column number modulo the button's length. Okay, and that's the same formula as in here. 0 plus C13, which is the top left cell, modulo the number of buttons. So B4 is the number of buttons. So it's the same formula. Once I'd worked it out in Excel, I just transcribed it straight into Java code, and it just became a trivial thing of just adding the rows, all the labels in the middle of the grid, the right button on the left, the correct button on the right, and then just going across the bottom in reverse order. We can get all that from the top corner index, all from the top corner index. So once I've done that, it just made the code so much easier. Okay, but of course that's only one way to do it. There's many ways to do it. I could have used a grid bag layout, and then I could have made a grid bag layout of cells and had a huge central region, and then I could have said put this button at that location, put this button at that location, and so on. And maybe the code would have been simpler. I can't imagine it would have been any shorter, to be honest. But anyway, it's something out there that people can try if they want to have a go. So that's my Dekatron Style Clock, and it was inspired by Paul Andrews. So I'll put a link to his channel in the description, because he's got some great videos there on these beautiful Nixie tubes and Nixie clocks that he's making. And it inspired me to spend a lot of a Monday mucking around making my own version in Java, and it's all good fun. I love doing that sort of thing. So if people want me to do a tutorial series on creating a Dekatron clock from scratch, I'm happy to do that. Let me know in the comments, and click like, of course. Otherwise, if people want more information or the code, let me know, and I'll add a link to my GitHub in the comments as well. Okay, thanks for watching. Have a nice day, and keep on clocking.